That's better there. That was better there. Now, what I'm doing, oddly enough, is this. If I can get you firm here, I can get this to fold.
When the best golfers in the world need to sharpen their skills, they look for the best teacher in the world. And over 100 touring pros look to Jimmy Ballard's Golf Workshop at Doral Resort and Country Club in Miami, Florida for that competitive edge. Like Jimmy Ballard, the Doral name stands for excellence. Spread over 2,400 acres, Doral offers sun and relaxation, as well as exercise and recreation. It's the home of the luxurious Doral Saturnia International Spa Resort, nationally recognized as one of the top spas in the eastern United States. But it's championship golf that Doral is best known for. 99 challenging holes spread over 6 courses, including the infamous Blue Monster, site of the Doral Open on the PGA Tour since 1962. At Doral, the adage practice makes perfect rings loud and clear. A lighted driving range on the resort side offers guests a constant workout. And if you need assistance with your swing, then head down the range to the Jimmy Ballard Golf Workshop, where high handicappers and scratch players practice the true fundamentals under the watchful eye of Jimmy Ballard. Jimmy has been teaching golf for nearly 3 decades, and over that time he's devised a definitive and organized method to enable golfers to understand the fundamental golf swing. For years, he studied the great ball strikers, Hogan, Snead, Nelson, and found similarities in all their swings. Today, along with his staff of teaching professionals, Jimmy Ballard connects golf swings with the proper fundamentals. Through classroom workshops that allow students to see the right moves, to personally videotape sessions on the practice tee, Jimmy Ballard emphatically proves that the golf swing is nothing more than a natural athletic move. Ballard is best known for his work with successful touring pros like Curtis Strange, Sandy Lyle, Seve Ballesteros, and Hal Sutton. But it's working with amateur players of all levels, men and women, young and old, that he finds most rewarding. Each week, Jimmy looks at hundreds of swings. He is a student of the game. And for 30 years, he has studied the fundamental golf swing.
Yeah. Now that's what I call a good golf swing.
That good golf swing belongs to Artie McNichol, Jimmy's #1 assistant. Today, they will demonstrate the techniques and fundamentals needed for a connected putting stroke, one that will hold up under pressure. Putting is a very precise part of golf, but no matter how you go about it, the main objective is to get the ball in the hole. It can happen from the left side or the right. It can be done with a cross-handed grip. Or it can be done with a conventional grip. The stroke can be made with a slightly open stance. Or one that is slightly closed. Putting from a crouched position enables a player to explode upward in times of jubilation. But great moments come with an upright stance as well. Next, Jimmy and Artie will demonstrate the proper fundamentals of putting, no matter what style you use.
Would you like to work on your game at the world-famous Jimmy Ballard Golf Workshop at Doral Country Club in Miami, Florida? The place where so many top touring professionals go to benefit from Jimmy's proven and time-tested methods. Pros at the pinnacle of their careers that still come home to Jimmy to work on the basic fundamentals. Well, if you can do the next best thing. Bring Jimmy home to you. The world's most successful teacher has just completed his all-new instructional videotape. Over an hour long, it methodically spells out and illustrates the very same fundamentals, complete with tips and drills that have helped so many touring pros. If you can't go to Jimmy, do your game a favor. Take Jimmy Ballard home with you. To order your copy, send a check for $49.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling, payable to Ballard Reed Associates, care of Resolution, 1 Mill Street, Burlington, Vermont. Or use your credit card and call 1-800-843-0048.
What I'd like to do is talk to you about putting now. And what I want you to understand is that the putting stroke is nothing but a miniature of the big golf swing. And what we want you to understand also is that you release the putter, that you have connection in putting. And one of the really important things you have to understand is, though, when we talk connection, it's connection with the shoulders. Now, there's not any body movement, but still, the body is still, but we still use the shoulders. We still maintain connection. Artie, if you would, let's talk about grip pressure a little and how we set the club to the ball and how we achieve connection in putting.
I think there are a variety of grips that people use, but more important than the grip itself is grip pressure. If you were to just barely hold the putter off the ground, light enough to not drop it, you might begin to feel the weight of the club in your shoulders, in your pecs and your lats. That's your shoulder. That's your shoulder girdle. So many of our students come to us with a lot of tension in their arms, and they'd never be able to develop a shoulder stroke. With softer arms, they can feel the weight of the club in their shoulders, and that's proper grip pressure. You want to feel the weight of the club in your shoulders, and then you can develop a connected shoulder stroke. I think grips vary, but if you use connection and if you release the club properly, you could do it with a conventional grip. You can do it cross-handed. There are a variety of grips, but grip pressure, feeling the weight of the club in your shoulder, I think is most important.
Now let's talk about how we take the putter away, how the club goes back off the ball, and how it releases down the line with connection. Artie, if you will, let's talk a little bit about the putter coming straight back opposed to coming inside slightly or taking it inside with your hands. Let's discuss that.
I think a lot of people are under the impression that a blade or a putter should be taken straight back and straight through. If you do that, you're effectively shutting the blade and opening it and perhaps blocking it. A pure shoulder stroke with connection, the putter blade would travel slightly inside and then release down the target line. It isn't taken inside by fanning the putter blade this way, because then you'd be required to flip your hands over trying to hit it or release it. Again, the blade doesn't go straight back, that would shut it, nor does it go straight through, that would block it. It would travel inside with connection and always staying square to your shoulders.
Show them the little drill we have, the same as with the club, of putting the club in the center of your chest, and let them see how the putter would travel back.
Once you set a club in the center of your chest, you'd be forced to use your shoulders, and you'd be forced to putt with connection. If I set the putter right in the center of my chest and just took a stroke back with my shoulders, you can see how the shaft remains in center, just like in a full shot. And that encourages my shoulders to work. And the same way going through, the shaft would have to stay in center. That simply tells you that your shoulders are working. As a matter of fact, when we hit putts and we ask our students to hit putts, that's one of the ways we get them to feel their shoulders. If the shaft stays in center throughout the stroke, they would have had to use their shoulders.
Show them what would happen if you rolled it, it's out of center, if you fanned it inside.
If I take it inside on purpose, all of a sudden that shaft comes out of center. And then if I flipped it this way, it's out of center, and I'm relying on little muscle.
Right, right. Now show them again, if you kept it in the center, how it travels back, slightly inside, and releases down the line. Now let's do it and hit a putt.
I think this putt breaks slightly to the left.
Right. Okay. Now you can see there when you release the putter, and let's talk a little about that. Notice when the putter is released how the ball rolls over. Anytime the putter is released, you're rolling the ball, but when you block putt it, that's when you're spinning the ball. That's when you never find the solid spot on the putter.
That's correct. If you want to hit solid putts, once you know where your sweet spot is, if you stay connected and use your shoulders, you're going to return that sweet spot exactly where it started every trip. If you shoulder stroke it, you're hitting it dead solid and square. If you block it, you may or may not hit the sweet spot, and you certainly are going to decelerate that putter.
Correct. And that's across the line, and it'll spin the ball sideways instead of over, instead of rolling the ball over. Now, we can talk here a little bit about Hubert Green. Always comes to mind with me because when Hubert plays good, nobody puts better than Hubert. And we know about the releasing. And you know, his putting stroke, he used to practice a lot, releasing the putter like a golf club as a practice aid.
Sure, I can remember Hubert. He'd even split his hands sometimes. And one thing that a lot of good putters will do, they'll take practice strokes like this. Probably the worst thing you can do in putting is to decelerate and dog it, leave it short. And if you were to make practice strokes very similar to a full shot and release it, Jimmy taught me once, sometimes you can release it by putting your finger down the shaft and just pointing to the target. I think people get more target-oriented when they point it at the target.
Definitely. I think one of the best drills in putting is with the index finger down the shaft. I think that gives you the feeling of the target all the time.
I think that if you were to run your finger down the shaft, the first thing that becomes important is the hole. You should be target-oriented. Now, if you were to run your finger down the shaft and simply try to stroke it to the hole, all of a sudden you might discover ways to release it. In other words, this is squaring it up to the hole. This would be blocking it, and that's not stroking it towards the hole.
And show them how, as you point to the hole with your index finger, that's the way to feel it released. And then, of course, in the longer shot, how if it were a full shot, how the elbow would fold and it would continue on the regular swing. That's the way it would travel. Not that you would take it there on the putting stroke. You would really never take it much past that height there. But if you did, you can see the continuation of the release in the golf swing. About some of the different players and how their strokes are, but let's also understand that basically they're still doing the same fundamentals that we're talking about. They're connected, they're releasing the putter. Let's talk a little about Hubert Green first, because when Hubert putts, he putted awfully well for a number of years. He had a lot of different stances. Sometimes he'd get wide, sometimes he'd get narrow, but always Hubert released the putt.
He sure did. He never blocked it. I can remember Hubert doing a couple of things. Sometimes he'd split his hands, and he always would take a putting stroke in which he really released it. Two things happen. If you're working on that, you certainly aren't going to decelerating it, and you certainly are going to release it when you're doing that.
It's a little bit of a feeling when we say release. It's a little bit of a feeling of the toe of the putter going toward the hole, never the heel of the putter. I think that's a good point to bring up to people.
Absolutely. If the toe squares up, the toe even works in the air. Sometimes that's one of the things we ask our students to do. You never want to make a stroke with the heel working up. That would be blocked, and it'd border on deceleration. If you work the toe up in the air, you've always got to release it, and that also always keeps the shaft right in center. That lets you know you're using your shoulders.
Let's talk a little bit about Ben Crenshaw. I don't think there's a better stroke than that one.
Boy, on the regular tour, Ben Crenshaw does what we teach probably better than anybody else. On the senior tour, from the left side of the golf ball, Bob Charles does what we teach. If you ever have a chance to get down their line, you're always going to see the blade travel slightly inside with their shoulders, and boy, does Ben always release that toe in the air. He never blocks it. Of course, he's always been considered the best putter on the tour. Why? He releases it.
I agree 100%. Show us that one time. Okay. Very good. Now let's talk a little bit about alignment, about how we position ourselves. Some people are a little wider than others, some more narrow. Let's talk a little bit about the head and the eyes, where they should be.
I think one thing that very often happens is that just regarding your head and eyes, so many people will be told that they've got to keep their heads still over the ball, listen for it to drop. If you did that, you'd never enjoy the roll of the ball. If you watch all the best putters in the world, every one of them will track that ball to the hole with their eyes. I think it was in '86 that Johnny Miller won the AT&T tournament at Pebble Beach, and he never once looked at the ball. He looked at the hole for 72 holes. He simply set up, and he stroked it right at the hole. If you have a pure connected stroke, I don't think there's a better way to do it.
Well, no question. And, you know, this gets right back to the golf swing. You want to be target-oriented, not ball-oriented. You want to roll the ball. You want to swing the club. You're not trying to hit the ball.
Absolutely.
The club is freewheeling through the ball. And I think that's a good point that people must understand.
Regarding the head, there are a couple of things in setup that I think are important. One thing,
get you a ball here,
that we often see with our students, the amateurs, they're always being told that they have to keep their head directly over the ball or have their head and eyes directly over the ball. That's correct, but it's not the only place you can have your head and eyes. You can also set your head and eyes inside that line. If you set your head and eyes inside that line, you can comfortably see your target. You can see the line you're trying to hit it down. If you set your head and eyes directly over the ball, you still can comfortably see the line you're trying to hit it down and your target. But the one place you can't keep your head and eyes is if you ever let them get beyond the ball like this. Now you're looking cockeyed across that line, and boy, are you going to pull and push to compensate for that. I think a good idea for amateurs is if you feel comfortable, let your head and eyes be a little bit inside the ball, and then you never run the risk of setting them beyond the ball. I think that's a killer with a lot of amateurs.
That, Artie, and your balance.
Sure.
If you get your head out over there, all your weight goes to your toes, which again gets center down and you're working around yourself.
You run the threat of using your arms again.
That's exactly right. Now let's talk a little bit about alignment, about how you line a putt up and where your lines are.
Absolutely. We've drawn a couple of lines here on the green tape here to just give you an idea how similar this is to a full stroke. We don't really care how wide you are or how narrow you are. We don't care if you have a slightly closed stance or a slightly open stance, but one thing is crucial, that both your hips and your shoulders are parallel left of the intended line of flight or the intended line you're trying to putt it down. Again, if you had a slightly closed stance or a slightly open stance, I think you can see with these two lines on the green that my shoulders and hips are always remaining parallel to the line I'm putting it down. I think that's the way you can encourage your shoulders to work.
Well, like Bobby Locke is an example. Bobby Locke is probably one of the great putters of all time. He was closed in his feet, but you can check him every time. His hips and shoulders are dead square.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So parallel lines with your shoulders and hips are crucial if you expect to make a connected shoulder stroke.
Also, we'd like to say this. You're always aiming the blade and the ball to your target. Your feet are always on the line, parallel left, like a railroad track. The ball in line of flight is the outer rail of the railroad track. The feet and legs and body is the inner rail. To line up, to have the putter and the ball aimed at your target, your feet and shoulders, or at least your hips and shoulders, are always left. That's what people must understand. Now, this putt breaks slightly right, a couple of inches probably, so therefore your target is 2 inches to the right, and the ball, and you just let the break of the green take over. Let's talk about taking the putter back, and let's talk about some of the myths in putting. People have been told for years to take it straight back. Let's show them what happens if you were to take the putter straight back. Let's show them how the blade would be hooded. The second thing in, people say take it inside. Let's show them how if you take it inside with your hands, all you can do is flip your hands coming back. Let's talk about inside, outside, and where we should be.
Sure. I think setting up on this line to demonstrate would be a good idea. Most people, like Jim said, have been taught to take a putter blade straight back. If you really did that, you'd be shutting it as you tried to keep it straight back on that line. By the same token, if you went straight through, you'd be opening it or even blocking it a little bit. If you took it to the inside, you'd be fanning the blade open. And to get it back to square, you'd have to roll your hands to do it, and that's difficult to do with any degree of consistency. A pure connected shoulder stroke, the blade travels slightly inside releases, and travels back slightly inside. That blade always stays square to your shoulders. That shows you that you're using your shoulders to stroke it, not your arms, hooding it and opening it or blocking it, and not your hands by fanning it open and turning your hands over to release it. A pure shoulder stroke, again, one with connection, would be straight back and it would travel slightly inside because your shoulders would work it that way. And as you released it, the blade would travel again slightly inside because it's square to your shoulders the whole time.
Artie, let's talk a little bit about a routine that we go through before we go play, and then we'll talk about some practice things for us to do.
Sure. I think it's real important, especially for amateurs. You don't spend much time getting ready to play, but you could use 10 minutes wisely. If you took 10 minutes and warmed up on the putting green before you went out and play, if you spent 8 or 9 of those 10 minutes hitting the longest possible putts you could find, a number of things would work to your advantage. First off, if you hit a couple of 70-footers and your green superintendent keeps the putting green the same speed as the course green, you ought to be able to tell whether they're fast or slow for the day if you're watching 70-footers roll. You can't do that on 5-footers. If you're watching 70-footers roll and you hit a few 70-footers and your first putt on the course is a 20-footer, it's a short 20-footer. But most importantly this, if you're practicing some very long putts and you just happen to hold your finish, you can work on your stroke. If I held my finish on a long putt and I noticed that the shaft was out of center or across in front of me, I'd know right away I'm using too much wrist. If I hit a long putt and I noticed that when I finished, the shaft was behind me a little bit and not in center, I know I blocked it a little bit or decelerated. If I'm working a long putt and I make a stroke and I keep the shaft in center and the toe works up, I'm working on my shoulder stroke. Then I know that I've got my putting stroke where I need it. Then I take the last couple of minutes and tone down that putting stroke, taking it much shorter back, and momentum carries it further, much shorter. That gives me a good way to warm up.
Now let's talk about a practice routine.
I know one thing, once I've developed my putting stroke, if I'm going to practice, I'm going to spend some time at it. What I'd probably do is I'd take 10 or 15 balls and start out with 3 or 4 footers. And I'd have a quota of how many I'd have to make before I could back up. And I'd start with 3 or 4 footers, I'd back up to 6 or 8 feet, then I'd go 8 to 12 feet, and I'd make a number of them before I'd back up. Hopefully I'd work all the way back out to a driver till I knocked it on the green, but that'd probably take me forever.
The game's major champions make up an outstanding field. The world's greatest golfers tee off in the final round of the Canadian Open. Today at 4 Eastern, live on ESPN. This is ESPN, the Total Sports Network.
What we've talked about today. First of all, the putting stroke is nothing more than a miniature of the full swing. Notice here as Artie goes through the ball, see how the left arm is laying on the body, and in the full swing, it would simply fold. The left elbow would fold down. Secondly, you must release the toe of the putter down the line. Now notice here as Artie lets the putter go, it travels slightly to the inside, and then notice how the toe of the club releases down the line. That's hitting it down through the ball, even on a putt. And finally, the shoulders must be aligned to the target. Your feet, legs, hips, and shoulders should be basically square. In some putting strokes, you might set slightly open in the feet and legs. That really doesn't matter, but the shoulders must be square to the line. Now remember, you must stay connected in the putting stroke as well as in the full swing. Now take these fundamentals to the practice tee and work on them.
Next week, Jimmy Ballard will review the 7 common denominators of a fundamental golf swing. Common denominator number 1 is the braced-connected address. Number 2 is taking the triangle and center away together. Number 3 is coiling into the brace of the right leg. Number 4 is the change of direction or the fall-in. Number 5 is the firing of the right side back to impact. Number 6 is maintaining the triangle with center facing the target. And finally, number 7 is the straight balanced finish. All this and more next week on Jimmy Ballard, the Fundamental Golf Swing. The preceding has been a presentation of Reed Dolph Incorporated.